With a 60% rise in the cost of natural gas last year and a 30% expected rise this year, landlords in New York City face financial ruin over the cost of heating their buildings. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the whole inflation issue, and the cost of fuel has been just skyrocketing, okay? Everything going on with, Russia and, just the inflation in general has caused fuel costs to just go up and up and up, and there's no sign of it stopping anytime soon. So landlords, particularly in New York, but really throughout the entire country, are facing increased fuel costs, okay, and that's natural gas, and it is a very bad situation with winter almost here. It's already almost October at this point, and it's going to bury some of them financially, especially in places like New York. See, in New York, a lot of the buildings, they have a boiler system where the landlord actually will pay for the heat for the entire building, and then it's shared by this boiler system, right? And so that means the landlord has to pay for the fuel costs. But a lot of the buildings in New York are under rent control, and the rent control board didn't allow them to raise rents enough to actually cover the increased cost for all this natural gas. So yeah, they're getting screwed. They're getting completely screwed. I did a video on the whole topic of why the rent increase that the rent control board allowed for New York landlords wasn't enough. And this further proves my point. It's a bad situation. This is why I tell people, if you aren't local to that sort of market, don't invest there. It's much better to invest a place like where I live, where, hey, I can pass that heating bill on to the tenant. Okay, the tenant has to pay their own heating bill. I'm not stuck with it. The tenants are paying their own utilities. There's no central boiler in my buildings. They're newer buildings. So each individual unit has its own furnace, and they have their own gas meter, and I don't have to worry about such things. It's unfortunate, though, that there are landlords who do have to deal with this, and this is part of the problem with dealing with a lot of these older buildings. Even outside of places like New York, if you have an older building, it's more likely that you're going to have to pay for some of the utilities yourself. Now, in a normal market, the landlord's just going to charge a higher rent to cover that cost, but in New York, that's not the sort of thing that's happening. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think, okay? So do you believe that fuel prices are going to continue to go up, or do you believe that they're going to go down? And also, in your units, in your buildings, if you have an apartment building, or if you own multifamily in particular, do you pay any of the utilities, or are the tenants responsible for all of their utilities? Do you sub-meter them? Do you do the RUB system, where you charge them a little bit every month, divide up the bill between all your tenants? What do you do? I'm just curious. So with all this inflation stuff going on, landlords really do have a good reason to be raising their rents every year, and that's what we should be doing. But unfortunately, the government thinks, oh, well, we can dictate the price of everything and it'll just work out. Well, no, this is reality. Things don't work that way. But anyway, let's get into this article. So this is coming from therealdeal.com, and it says, winter is coming. Landlords face brutal heating season. It's got a nice little picture here of the Night King from Game of Thrones, one of my favorite shows, and winter is coming. Anyway, let's get into it. With temperatures dropping into the 40s in New York, landlords are cranking on the heat, but given the rising cost of fuel, many already had the jitters. There's a lot of anxiety going into this heating season, said Aaron Weber, an owner at Weber Realty Management, which oversees 400 apartments across Manhattan and Brooklyn. Last winter, landlords were slammed by natural gas bills as high as 60% above the previous year's levels. Utility providers such as Con Edison blamed the colder season and rising energy costs. Since September 2020, the price of natural gas has more than quadrupled, surging to $8.81 per million British thermal units, a 16-year high. Now, ahead of the official October 1st start to the city's heat season, which runs through the end of May, Con Ed warns commercial heating bills could jump another 28%. And national grid project prices could climb by 30% annually as an even more frigid winter pressures already tight supplies. For many landlords, particularly rent-stabilized building owners already hammered by inflation, the price pop will mean fiscal pain. Some buildings may not have the reserves to survive the winter in good financial standing. Yeah, and I'm sure that there are cases where there's going to be landlords who are just not able to make it, and that is unfortunate, okay? Now, speaking of my personal experience, I used to own a fourplex building in Phoenix, Arizona. I sold it about 2 years ago, in the first year of the pandemic in 2020, right? And I had to pay the water bill, the gas bill, and the trash, and I think it was water, sewer, trash, and gas I had to pay on that place, right? And I didn't have a RUB system. I didn't have any kind of sub-metering for that. The tenants were in charge of the electricity, and I think that was it. So yeah, I do know what it's like to own a building where, hey, the landlord is in charge of some of the utilities, and believe me, it sucked. And this is part of the reason why going forward I'm only buying buildings where the tenants pay all their own utilities. I remember there were some months, like for a long time, for probably 2 or 3 years when I owned that building, I was only paying about $200 a month, right? And then suddenly I would get like a $400, my bill would double. And what it was the tenant was, they had a leak in their toilet, like it just kept running and it just was using water. And I didn't know about it. And, my property manager didn't know. The tenant didn't report it. And until I sent my property manager out there to check on it, nobody knew, and I just was getting I just got an extremely high water bill because of that. Well, imagine that gas bills work the same way. Imagine you have a tenant who's got, they've got heat coming into their unit, but they've got the windows open because they're too hot. This is the problem when you share heating for an entire building. This is why I much prefer individual heating units per different unit. Now I know these are older buildings and that might not be possible without a major renovation. So when you're in a place like New York where you can't actually recover the cost of that kind of renovation, then you're going to keep the boiler system in there for as long as possible and just keep band-aiding it and keep it running, and that will be cheaper. But man, as a landlord, I wouldn't want to own one of those buildings. So let's continue with this article. The long game. Landlords buy fuel in one of two ways. They lock in prices with multi-year contracts or pay market price each month. Those entering the heating season mid-contract are in the best shape to weather recent price spikes. Zachary Kerr, whose portfolio spans 1,000 units in Brooklyn, is about 18 months into a 3-year agreement for natural gas. He's paying around 46 cents per therm, a price he signed up for in 2021. The move paid off handsomely. Natural gas prices in September rose to $1.08 per therm, according to National Grid. But for owners with expiring contracts, the price jump will be a big budget hit. For owners who are coming out of contract, it's like, how do you cope with that, Kerr said. So yeah, I guess the way that they buy gas is they set the price. They agree to pay this certain price for the next 3 years, and then they only have, they pay a flat rate. Now, I've heard of this before. I've not really been a big fan of that personally, because it can really screw you if you end up buying it at a very high rate and then the price of gas drops super low and you could be saving hundreds of dollars. But, in the end, I don't know which way would actually be better to, do your business. It is nice knowing if you have a nice flat rate set, how much your expenses are going to be month to month. And that's probably more important to a apartment landlord like this. Lose-lose. Landlords on month-to-month plans likely won't fare much better. Weber, for example, arranges gas service for the owners of nearly 30 buildings. As a result, he opts to pay that monthly market price. His management firm views gas contracts as a gamble with someone else's money. It's like you're betting in the casino, the prices are going to go up, he said. So if prices go down, we just look like assholes. Sometimes they do go down. During the fracking boom of the 2000s, natural gas prices plummeted, but few are predicting that now. Heading into heating season, natural gas futures have been exceptionally volatile, reflecting great uncertainty about what gas will cost in the coming months. Yeah, back when they actually allowed fracking to occur, and when the president of the United States wasn't trying to shut down everything that would make fuel costs lower, guess what? Natural gas was cheap. We see the result of all of these ridiculous economic policies now. Okay, we are, our prices are just going through the roof, and you know how I feel about the whole issue. Okay, you know that I don't agree with all of this environmental protection stuff that hurts the economy, that hurts people. And yeah, while I do believe that maybe there is a problem there has to be a better solution than to say, well, we're just gonna impoverish our people and make them suffer. Okay, that seems like a dumb solution to me. So let me keep going. Rent dearth. Come October, owners of stabilized apartments can bump the rent 3.25% on new one-year leases and 5% on new two-year leases. But that won't offset rising operating costs, which include utility expenses, a report last week by the landlord group Community Housing Improvement Program found. When the Rent Guidelines Board penciled out the revenue boost owners would need to keep pace with costs, it estimated that fuel costs would dip by 1.7%. The board made a similar prediction last year, forecasting that fuel prices would grow by 0.1% and owners would need a 2% rent hike to keep pace with costs. So yeah, there is the truth, right? The Rent Guidelines Board, they predicted that, fuel costs will increase by 1.7%. Meanwhile, they're going up by 30%. And last year, they predicted it would go up by 0.1% and it went up by 60%. So as you can tell, rent control is a joke, okay? And they have no intention of actually giving the landlord the rent increase that they need. But this is the problem when you have the government setting price control. So yeah, we have the real issue here isn't that the fuel costs are going up. The real issue is government price controls in the form of rent control, which is keeping the landlords from being able to raise their rents to keep pace with prices.